10 on a Saturday, one take. We can do this. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. If there was an overarching message to this section, it would probably be conquest through sacrifice, strength through covenant love. What I love about the section of the Beatitudes is we begin to see little pockets of what our faith will become. Where Moses preached blessings over the Israelites, Jesus was going all over Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every kind of disease and sickness among the people. In this setting, the kinds of people who are following Jesus are those rejected by the harsh Roman society in which your value is determined by what you can offer. In fact, the idea of a Jewish teacher proclaiming blessings over people isn't new. There was another teacher, and his blessings went something like this. I can think of 9 whom I would call blessed, and a 10th whom my tongue proclaims. Blessed is the man who delights in his children, and the one who lives to see the downfall of his enemies. Blessed is the one who lives with a sensible wife, and one who does not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Blessed is the one who does not sin with the tongue, and the one who does not serve an inferior. Blessed is the one who finds a friend, and the one who speaks to an attentive audience. At first these sound Bible-like, but do you see how they allude to a clear class divide? Blessed are you if you are so important people want to listen to you. Blessed are you if you can defeat your enemies. Blessed are you when you don't serve an inferior. So the concept of Beatitudes are not lost on this audience, which is why I think Matthew 4 is so powerful. Because there would be nobody with more knowledge than Jesus, and with all of his knowledge, he teaches in synagogues and already gives his life and his time to the needy. Where the Sanhedrin secluded themselves from people, Jesus walked among them. Where the Old Testament patriarchs led the Israelites, Jesus brings the kingdom of heaven to all. Here we see a microcosm of the scripture that would become, faith without works is dead. It's important to realize one doesn't prove the other, but here in Matthew 4 verse 23 to 25, Jesus shows they cannot exist separate from each other. It is impossible to love God, have your heart change, and not serve people. It is equally vain to assume you can truly love people without loving God first. John 15 verse 13 to 14 says, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for a friend. You are my friends if you do what I command." Jesus' ministry led to large crowds following him from the Decapolis, Galilee, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. In doing this subtle action, Matthew reaffirms Jesus as the new Abraham, the one to create a new covenant people. But this time, this includes all people. He goes to those forgotten by society, neglected by the world, and says, "Blessed are you." Here fulfilling the prophecy in Isaiah 61, and I think the whole passage is beautiful, so I'm just going to read it. And based on the context of the previous episode, I hope you see how it relates to this. "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. They will rebuild ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Strangers will shepherd your flocks. Foreigners will work your fields and vineyards. And you will be called priests of the Lord. You will be named ministers of your God. You will feed on the wealth of the nations, and in their riches you will boast. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and wrongdoing. In my faithfulness, I will reward my people and make an everlasting covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations, and their offspring among the peoples. all who see them will acknowledge that they are a people the Lord has blessed. I delight greatly in the Lord. My soul rejoices in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation and arrayed me in a robe of his righteousness. As a bridegroom adorns his head like a priest, and as a bride adorns herself with jewels. For as the soil makes the sprout come up, and a garden causes seeds to grow, so the sovereign Lord will make righteousness and praise spring up before all nations. And so, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These blessings, the Beatitudes, are meant to mirror the blessings in Deuteronomy intended for the Israelites. Yet two things are prevalent here. One, the kingdom is always spoken about in the present tense. Every other blessing is spoken about in future tense. And two, where Moses spoke only to the Israelites, God's chosen people, Jesus doesn't qualify the statement to a nation or a people group, but says to all people who fall within this state, poor in spirit, the kingdom of heaven is yours. And if these teachings are a jumping off point for all scripture in the New Testament, then relating to how Jesus begins his ministry, scriptures like Romans 10 verse 13 are not new, but simply a blown out version of the message Jesus was already preaching. For there is no difference between Jew and Gentile. The same Lord is the Lord of all and richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Since Matthew introduces Jesus' sermon by making the connection between Jesus and Moses, it is important to read the teachings of the new Moses against the teachings of Moses. The adjective blessed was only used by Moses in his blessings on Israel in Deuteronomy 33 verse 29. Blessed are you, Israel, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord. He is your shield and helper and your glorious sword. Enemies will cower before you, and you will tread on their heights. Some translations have it as tread on their backs, which I think is a very funny insult. But Israel's blessing had both historical and future context. Saved by the Lord referred to Israel's exodus out of Egypt. The remainder of the blessings assured the Israelites' success in the future promised land. The new Moses highlights a spiritual salvation, freeing his people from slavery to sin, and spiritual victory, conquest and inheritance of a new promised land. So what does that mean? Well, remember the blessings are not simply a list of things to achieve, but rather a description of the kinds of people who we are called to be. And through sanctification, you see this change happen. In the Old Testament, being poor in spirit related to those who cried out for God's help, depended entirely on Him for their needs, and had a humble and contrite spirit, and experienced His deliverance and enjoyed His undeserved favor. This is highlighted in Psalm 86, verse 1 to 5. Listen, Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Protect my life, for I am faithful. You are my God. Save your servant who trusts in you. Be gracious to me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant's life, because I turn to you, Lord. For you, Lord, are kind and ready to forgive, rich in faithful love to all who call on you. Here you should see the subtle nod in Psalm to the scripture we read earlier in Romans, the promise in Isaiah, and the fulfillment in Matthew. As mentioned earlier, this blessing is the only one in the present tense. All others are in the future tense. They will be comforted, they will inherit the earth, they will be shown mercy. But only the kingdom of heaven is spoken about in the present tense. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus is pointing out that the kingdom of heaven has come through him, but fulfillment of many kingdom promises will only occur in the future, through the second coming of Christ. So what does it mean to be poor in spirit? Well, the first two blessings, blessed are the poor in spirit and blessed are the meek, are simplified into the greatest commandments in Matthew 22, verse 37 to 39. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So I hope you see to be poor in spirit means to be entirely dependent on God. To be entirely dependent on God means to understand your own depravity and therefore your need for Him. And simultaneously, you also understand His goodness. To non-Christians, it probably sounds like we hate ourselves, but only when you understand God's standard of goodness do you realize how much help you actually need in this world. Depending entirely on God is understanding that He is good, and only in Him do I have freedom and protection. If understanding your dependence on God is the first step, then obedience usurps sacrifice. Acts cannot save, but only a true revelation of the one true God. And so, God has come to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim good news to the poor. And if the Beatitudes are a map from Jesus on the kinds of people we are to be, it is not a new command for us to proclaim the good news. It is not a new command for us to be entirely dependent on God. It is not a new command for us to humble ourselves before the one true God and rely fully on Him for everything we need in this world. And again, regarding the Israelites, when we get to the Lord's Prayer, and we get to the part that says, "Give us today our daily bread," it relates right back to your dependence on God for everything you need in that day. He's the only source of anything that is good in this world.